If you think about the really big chapters of human history, especially, how we first migrated out of Africa and spread into Europe, you probably picture certain things. Mountains, maybe plains, familiar coastlines.
Right, the standard overland routes we always talk about.
Exactly. But today, we're kind of redrawing that map. We're looking at this crucial ancient superhighway that's actually been hidden for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Submerged, way down beneath maybe 100 meters of water.
It's a set of findings that really could challenge how we understand that whole early human dispersal story.
Mm-hmm.
For such a long time, the main focus has been on that northern route out of Anatolia,
Yeah, the Marmara-Thrace corridor.
Mm-hmm. That's always been seen as the primary gateway into Europe. But what if, maybe, the more effective route, perhaps the one used more often, was this enormous land bridge? One that periodically appeared and disappeared in the Aegean Sea during the Ice Ages.
Precisely. So we're diving into some recent findings from a surface survey. It was conducted in the Ayvalık region of Western Anatolia that's on the northeastern Aegean coast in modern Turkey.
An area that's been, surprisingly, a bit of a blind spot for Paleolithic research until quite recently.
Totally. But now, just from this initial survey, we have this startling evidence popping up 138 Paleolithic artifacts. And suddenly this location looks like it could be a really strategic crossroads for how early hominins moved around. Okay, let's unpack this.
Well, first, to really get why Ayvalık matters so much, you have to appreciate its geography. The Aegean isn't some peripheral backwater. It's actually quite central.
Right. It connects everything: Africa, Asia, Europe.
Exactly. So it's this critical hub for movement. And not just a pathway, but during those really wild climate swings in the Pleistocene, it likely served as a refuge too. A place where groups could actually survive when other areas became uninhabitable.
And the absolute key to this ancient highway is the sea level, isn't it? When we talk about the Ice Age, those big glacial periods, the scale of change is almost hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. Sea levels didn't just dip a bit, they plummeted, sometimes more than 100 meters lower than they are today. That's a truly dramatic reshaping of the landscape.
And that massive drop exposed the entire North Aegean shelf. So instead of the islands and the coastline we see now, you would have had these huge continuous land masses.
This created what researchers are calling the North Aegean Island Bridge.
Mhm.
A solid, walkable land link stretching pretty much all the way from Anatolia over to mainland Greece.
So if you look at Ayvalık on a map today, you see the coast, the little islands like Kunda and Lael Island. That picture is completely misleading for deep history.
Completely. During those low sea level times, these areas we now think of as coastal or islands, they weren't coastal at all. They would have been interior zones, like deep inside an expansive terrestrial plain.
Wow. Okay.
Think about that. If you're a hominin group moving west out of Anatolia, you're not navigating islands or water crossings there. You're walking across this vast, likely quite temperate landscape, probably river valleys, resources, far from any actual seacoast at that point.
Which makes that traditional northern route through Thrace seem maybe less appealing when this massive land bridge was available, right?
Potentially, yes. If we try and connect this to the bigger picture, Ayvalık wasn't just near a road. It was smack bang in the middle of a major continental pathway. Its location was prime.
That context alone is huge. So, okay, let's look at how they actually found this evidence. The research itself was a reconnaissance survey, quite focused, over about 2 weeks back in June 2022.
Right. And an interesting detail from the paper is that this really crucial fieldwork was done by an all-female team of Turkish archaeologists, experts in the field.
Yeah, I noted that too. And given the terrain they described, that's pretty impressive work.
It really is. They covered about 200 square kilometers systematically, using satellite imagery, geological maps to guide them. But then the actual work, well, it meant getting out there on foot, often in really difficult conditions, apparently muddy lowland basins, complex coastal plains.
And the challenges they were up against were just enormous, which makes finding anything at all even more significant, I think.
Definitely. Nature itself has kind of conspired to hide this evidence. You've got active geomorphology, tectonics, always shifting things, volcanism in the region, those constant sea level changes, watching over everything, burying things.
Or destroying them outright.
Exactly. And then there's the sedimentation, that extensive alluvial cover, basically. Deep layers of fine mud along the shorelines. It just blankets everything.
Like an archaeological sponge.
Plus, you add modern human activity on top, all the olive groves, construction, roads being built. It all disturbs or covers up potential sites. So yeah, it's a real testament to their skill and persistence that they found what they did.
And despite all that, They located 138 lithic artifacts, stone tools, spread across 10 different Paleolithic find spots.
Now, these were mostly surface finds, which is important. They weren't digging deep stratified layers yet, but they were finding these clear, albeit low-density scatters of artifacts. Clear evidence people were there.
And what about the materials the tools were made from? That was interesting, too.
Yes, the raw materials tell a story. Even though the area has loads of volcanic rock like basalt and andesite just lying around, the toolmakers ignored it. They were highly selective.
What did they use instead?
They crafted their tools exclusively from high-quality, local stuff. Flint, chalcedony, and quartz.
Okay, so why does that selectivity matter so much?
Well, it suggests they weren't just grabbing the nearest handy rock. They knew the landscape. They knew where the good stuff was, the best raw materials. And they likely planned their movements or settlements around accessing and using those specific resources.
So it hints at more than just quick stopovers, maybe longer-term habitation, or at least repeated, planned use of the area.
Precisely. Not just groups wandering through randomly.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. Because these 138 artifacts, they aren't all from one single point in time, are they?
Not at all. The collection shows what the study calls a remarkable temporal depth and technological diversity. It basically tells us Ayvalık wasn't just some brief campsite. It was likely a successfully occupied landscape for potentially hundreds of thousands of years, on and off.
Wow. So where does the timeline start?
We can trace it way back, all the way to the lower Paleolithic. It's a small number of tools from that period, but really significant ones. They found a handful of large cutting tools, specifically 4 hand axes and 2 cleavers.
Hand axes. Okay, so we're talking very early humans here. And these weren't just crude lumps of rock, right? The paper mentioned something specific about their type.
That's right. The hand axes have features associated with what archaeologists call the Mycokian type. Now, without getting too technical, Mycokian tools aren't those really big, sort of rough, teardrop-shaped axes you might imagine. They tend to be thinner, more finely shaped, often with distinctive concave edges.
More refined, then.
Yes, more refined. Their features place them within the late Acheulean tradition. This points to a pretty high degree of skill and technological thought. They weren't just basic chopping tools. They were likely quite versatile, well-crafted implements.
And finding these early, well-made tools confirms that hominins, whoever they were back then, were using this land bridge route really early on. Potentially, hundreds of thousands of years ago.
That's the implication. But the bulk of the evidence, the part that really suggests persistent long-term use of this Ayvalık corridor, comes from the Middle Paleolithic.
Okay.
That period yielded the most extensive collection of tools. Some sites, like one called Şirinket II, gave them 44 artifacts just from that one spot.
And what characterizes the Middle Paleolithic finds? What kind of technology are we seeing?
Here, it's all about technological sophistication, specifically highly standardized Levallois technology. The team found 23 Levallois cores.
Okay, Levallois. Remind us briefly what that means.
Sure. Levallois is basically a really clever way to make stone tools. It shows advanced planning. Instead of just whacking a rock, hoping for a useful flake, the toolmaker first meticulously shapes the core stone in a very particular way.
Preparing it.
Exactly. Preparing it so that the next strike, the important one, detaches a flake or a point of a predetermined size and shape. Almost like manufacturing standardized parts.
That sounds really efficient.
It is. Extremely efficient use of good raw material. And this level of planning and standardization is the hallmark of the Mysterian tradition. This signals the presence of technologically advanced populations, could be Neanderthals, could be early Homo sapiens who are really effectively exploiting resources in this critical area.
So, lower Paleolithic than a strong Middle Paleolithic presence. Does the story continue?
It does, right up towards the end of the last ice age. Moving into the upper and then the Epipaleolithic periods finds mostly in the southern and eastern parts of the survey area the technology shifts again. The focus moves towards producing much smaller, more specialized tools. We see evidence for blade and bladelet production using different core preparation techniques like prismatic and pyramidal cores.
And any specific tool types that stand out from this later period?
Yeah, a few diagnostic tools, things like end scrapers, some of which are carinated, meaning they're thick and steep-edged, maybe used for heavy-duty scraping on hides or wood. And crucially, they found one transverse arrowhead.
An arrowhead, wow.
That specific type of stone point, the transverse arrowhead, is a known marker for Epipaleolithic hunting technology in Anatolia and the surrounding regions. Finding one there firmly links this late activity in Ayvalık to those wider cultural traditions.
So it confirms that this corridor, this land bridge, remained important and actively used right up until the sea levels rose again and, well, drowned it.
Pretty much, yeah. Right up until the end of the Pleistocene, beginning of the Holocene.
So putting it all together, why does finding this incredible range from Acheulean hand axes through sophisticated Levallois right up to late Epipaleolithic arrowheads, why does that full sequence matter so much for this specific location?
Well, it fundamentally changes our perspective on the Aegean during the Pleistocene. It wasn't some static barrier or just a marginal zone people occasionally skirted around. It was clearly an integrated and dynamic zone.
Integrated how?
The mix of technologies found suggests interactions, maybe overlapping traditions, between groups we might think of as mainland types, and those may be more adapted to these fluctuating coastal or island-like environments when the sea was higher. Ayvalık seems central to a shared network of movement and technology.
Can we make comparisons to other known sites in the Aegean to really place Ayvalık in context?
Absolutely. That's crucial. Let's take Rhodophnidia, for example, on the Greek island of Lesbos. That's a major lower Paleolithic Acheulean site dating quite early, maybe 470,000 to 160,000 years ago.
Okay, how does Ayvalık compare?
It's interesting. Rhodophnidia's hand axes are often described as being, well, quite massive, maybe a bit rougher in finish. In contrast, the few lower Paleolithic bifaces from Ayvalık are described as thinner, more refined.
What might that difference mean?
It's suggestive. It could mean the Ayvalık occupation is slightly later within the Acheulean, showing technological development. Or perhaps it reflects a different focus, maybe more specialized tasks needing finer tools rather than heavy-duty chopping. It hints at variability, evolution within the toolkit across the region.
What about Stelida? That's on Naxos, another Greek island,
Yeah.
right? And it's famous for having a long sequence.
Yes, Stelida is key because it's a stratified site covering lower, middle, and upper Paleolithic. And here we see strong similarities with Ayvalık.
Like what?
Specifically, Ayvalık shares key tool types or morphotypes with Stelida, things like those centripetal Levallois cores we talked about, and also those carinated end scrapers from the later periods.
So similar ways of making tools.
Exactly. It suggests a shared technological know-how, a consistent network. Groups moving across this exposed land bridge, maybe following similar resources seasonally, were using very similar methods for making their essential tools over vast distances. Technology was being shared, maintained across this corridor.
And even if we compare Ayvalık just to its newest mainland neighbors, say, up along the Çanakkale coast north of the Edremit Gulf.
Even there seem to be differences. The study suggests Ayvalık's lower Paleolithic hand axes look technologically a bit more developed than some of the more archaic forms found further north along that coastline.
Huh. So Ayvalık wasn't just a passive recipient of technology flowing through?
Perhaps not. Maybe it was a place where innovation or refinement was happening. Or perhaps it was a particularly attractive spot for groups arriving with already advanced toolkits. The overall synthesis seems pretty clear, though. The range of stone tools demonstrates Ayvalık was a long-term habitat for hominids, absolutely critical for movement and technological exchange whenever that land bridge was open.
So the discovery of this whole assemblage, with its time depth and technological variety, it really establishes Ayvalık as this crucial piece of the puzzle, doesn't it, for understanding the Pleistocene occupation of the northeastern Aegean?
It absolutely does. We've moved past just speculating about this land bridge. The evidence shows it was real and it was used. It was quite literally a bridge between continents at times.
But as always in archaeology, especially with surface finds, the work is just beginning, right?
Oh, definitely. The researchers themselves are very clear about this. Because these are mainly surface finds, the immediate next steps are critical. They need absolute dating, trying to get actual dates on these occupations. They need stratigraphic excavation, carefully digging down layer by layer to see how these tools relate to each other and the environment.
And understanding that ancient environment, too.
Yes, paleo-environmental reconstruction. What did this landscape actually look like when people were there? What plants, what animals? That context is vital. We need to move these artifacts from just being shapes we classify to being pinned down in time and context, using things like carbon dating where possible or other methods for older periods.
That sounds like the work for the next decade or more in this region, but it leaves us with a really kind of mind-blowing final thought, doesn't it?
This raises an important question. Considering that Ayvalık and its islands that we see today were actually interior zones far inland on this vast plain during the glacial maximum, and given that the sea level dropped by over 100 meters and then rose again, essentially sealing off everything that was on that lower plain. just how much crucial evidence is down there.
You mean perfectly preserved?
Potentially. Stratified sites, campsites, kill sites, maybe even skeletal remains, evidence for human dispersal, adaptation, lifeways, all perfectly preserved but totally inaccessible beneath the modern Aegean Sea.
What volume of history is still down there? Wow. A whole massive chapter of the human story just lying offshore, waiting perhaps for the technology or the opportunity to bring it back to the surface. That is a truly provocative thought to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the lost land bridge of Ayvalık.